Introduction. A lifeguard, taking responsibility for the lives of people, who are participating in a variety of aquatic activities. As a rescuer with a legal responsibility to act in an emergency, you must be self-disciplined, and confident in your knowledge, and skills. You need to have solid public relations, customer service, and conflict resolution skills. In addition, you must be willing to be a leader, as well as a good team member. Being a lifeguard requires maturity, professionalism, and competence in specialized rescue techniques. What is a lifeguard? A lifeguard is a person who supervises the safety and rescue of swimmers, surfers, and other water sports participants, such as in a swimming pool, water park, or beach. Responsibilities of a lifeguard. As a lifeguard, your primary responsibility is to prevent drowning and other injuries from occurring at your aquatic facility. Lifeguards do this in many ways, such as monitoring activities in and near the water through patron surveillance, preventing injuries by minimizing or eliminating hazardous situations or behaviors, enforcing facility rules and regulations and educating patrons about them, recognizing and responding quickly and effectively to all emergencies, administering first aid and CPR, including using an automated external defibrillator, AED, and, if trained, administering emergency oxygen when needed. Working as a team with other lifeguards, facility staff, and management. A lifeguard is also responsible for other tasks, which are secondary responsibilities. Secondary responsibilities must never interfere with patron surveillance. Secondary responsibilities can include testing the pool water chemistry, assisting patrons, conducting safety orientations, administering swim tests, and fitting life jackets, cleaning, or performing maintenance, completing records and reports, performing opening duties, closing duties, or facility safety checks and inspections. Characteristics of a lifeguard. To fulfill the responsibilities of a lifeguard, you must be mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared at all times to do your job. As a lifeguard, you must be knowledgeable and skilled. Have the appropriate knowledge and skills to help prevent and respond to emergencies. Successful completion of this lifeguarding course is your initial training. You must maintain your knowledge and skills through annual or pre-season orientation and training and through regular, frequent in-service training. Reliable. Arrive at work on time, accept assignments willingly, be committed to your work, and respond to all incidents quickly and effectively. Mature. Be a leader but also be a good team member, act responsibly, take initiative, and obey all facility rules, leading others by example. Courteous and consistent. Be polite, and enforce the rules firmly, and equally for everyone. Positive. Show a positive attitude in all job activities. Professional. Look professional, and be prepared to respond appropriately to any situation by wearing the lifeguard uniform only when on duty, sitting or standing upright at the lifeguarding station, being well groomed, keeping rescue equipment positioned for immediate use when on duty, keeping your eyes focused on your assigned zone of responsibility at all times, keeping interactions with others brief and not letting them interrupt patron surveillance, transferring and handling equipment carefully, observing all facility rules, regulations, and policies, eating only when on break or off surveillance duty, healthy and fit. To stay in good physical condition, a lifeguard must exercise, eat, and hydrate properly, rest adequately, protect yourself from sun exposure. Lifeguard's list of don'ts. As a lifeguard, there are also some things you must not do. Keep the following in mind. Do not leave your lifeguard station while on surveillance duty. Do not use mobile phones, or other devices for personal calls, texting, or other types of communication when on duty. Do not slouch in a lifeguard stand, always be attentive, and sit, or stand upright when on surveillance duty. Do not participate in conversations at the lifeguard station. Do not eat at the lifeguard station. Do not leave the facility while on duty. Do not use alcohol, or drugs. Alcohol, or drugs can negatively affect job performance, and can jeopardize the safety of patrons, co-workers, and yourself. Lifeguards' legal considerations. To avoid liability, it is important to understand the following legal principles that apply to your role as a lifeguard. Duty to act. While on the job, you have a legal responsibility to act in an emergency. Failure to adhere to this duty could result in legal action. Standard of care. You are expected to meet a minimum standard of care, which may be established in part by your training program, and in part by state, or local authorities. This standard requires you to communicate proper information, and warnings to help prevent injuries. Recognize someone in need of care. Attempt to rescue those needing assistance. Provide emergency care according to your level of training. Negligence. When a person is injured, or suffers additional harm because lifeguards failed to follow the standard of care, or failed to act at all, the lifeguards may be considered negligent. Negligence includes failing to control, or stop any behaviors that could result in further harm, or injury. Failing to provide care. Providing inappropriate care. Providing care beyond the scope of practice, or level of training. Abandonment. Once care is initiated, it must be continued until emergency medical services personnel, or someone with equal, or greater training arrives, and takes over. You can be held legally responsible for abandoning a person, who requires ongoing care if you leave the scene, or stop providing care. Confidentiality. While making a rescue, or providing care, you may learn something about the injured, or ill person, such as information about medical conditions, physical problems, and medications taken. This person's right to privacy is protected by laws that require you to keep information learned about the person confidential. Reporters, insurance investigators, or attorneys may ask questions following an incident. This information should not be shared with anyone except EMS personnel, directly associated with the person's care, facility management, or the facility's legal counsel. Sharing personal information with individuals, not directly associated with an injured person's medical care, may constitute a breach of the victim's privacy. Documentation. Properly documenting injuries and incidents is very important. If legal action occurs later, your records and reports can provide legal documentation of what was seen, heard, and done at the scene. Complete the required forms as soon as possible, after the incident, preferably immediately after the incident has wrapped up. As time passes, critical details may be forgotten. When completing a report, state the facts of the incident without including your opinion. Once the report is complete, sign and date it, and have all responders read the report, then sign and date it as well. A copy of the report should be kept by the facility. Consent. An injured or ill person must give permission before responders can provide first aid and emergency care. To obtain consent, state your name. State your level of training. Ask if you may help. Explain that you would like to assess him or her to find out what you think may be wrong, or what you can do to help. Explain what you plan to do. With this information, an ill or injured person can grant his or her informed consent for care. Someone who is unconscious, confused, or seriously injured, or ill, such as in a non-fatal drowning, may not be able to grant consent. In these cases, the law assumes the victim would give consent if he or she were able to do so. This is called implied consent. Implied consent also applies to a minor who needs emergency medical assistance, and whose parent or guardian is not present. Refusal of care. Some injured or ill people may refuse care, even if they desperately need it. Parents also may refuse care for children. Even though someone may be seriously injured, his or her wishes must be honored. In these situations, you should explain why he or she needs care. For significant injuries, you should call EMS personnel to evaluate the situation. For non-life-threatening emergencies, when care is refused, and you are asked not to call EMS personnel, make it clear that you are neither denying nor withholding care, and that you are not abandoning the victim. You must document any refusal of care. Someone else, such as another lifeguard, should witness the person's refusal of care, and sign a report. Ask the person who refuses care to sign the report as well. If he or she refuses to sign, note that on the report. Surveillance and recognition. Your primary responsibility as a lifeguard is to help ensure patron safety and protect lives. The main tool used to accomplish this is patron surveillance, keeping a close watch over the people in the facility, and intervening when necessary. You will spend most of your time on patron surveillance. To do this effectively, you must be alert, and attentive, and ready to react at all times, as you continuously supervise patrons. Surveillance and recognition. A conscious drowning victim struggles to breathe, and cannot call out for help. Lifeguards must understand that only a few minutes can make the difference between life and death. To give a victim the greatest the chance of survival, and a normal outcome, you must recognize when a person needs help, or is in danger of drowning, and you must act immediately. If there is any question whether a person in the water is beginning to drown, or merely playing games, it is essential that you intervene, and if necessary, remove the person from the water immediately, and provide care. Drowning incident facts worldwide. An estimated 372,000 people died from drowning, making drowning a major public health problem worldwide. Injuries account for over 9% of total global mortality. Drowning is the third leading cause of unintentional injury death, accounting for 7% of all injury-related deaths. 372,000 people die from drowning every year. Over half of all drowning deaths are among those aged under 25 years. Males are twice as likely to drown as females. Drowning is one of the 10 leading causes of death for people aged 1 to 24 years. The main causes of drowning include: for children, a lapse in adult supervision is the single most important contributory cause for drowning. Children can drown not only in pools, lakes, and the sea, but also in other bodies of water such as bathtubs, buckets of water, etc. Children with some swimming skills can get into trouble if they attempt activity beyond their capabilities, or if they are injured due to unsafe behavior in the water. Alcohol consumption prior to swimming or falling into water is a common contributory factor in drowning for children and adolescents in many countries. The non-use of life jackets has been linked to drowning accidents related to yacht, boat, and canoe use. In open waters, people can drown if their swimming skills are insufficient to deal with adverse situations, such as large waves, outgoing tides, and offshore winds. In swimming pools, hot tubs, spas, and other such enclosed recreational areas, a variety of scenarios can come into play. Strong suction at inlets and outlets of pools can entrap body parts or hair and hold the victim's head underwater, causing drowning. The clarity of the water in swimming areas can also be a factor. In turbid water, the lifeguard may not be able to identify someone in need of help. Overcrowded swimming areas present a similar problem. In many instances, drowning can be prevented. Several of these preventative measures include: Check the water depth before entering. Never dive headfirst into water of unknown depth. Teaching children and adults to swim along with education regarding the risks of swimming in particular conditions. Refraining from swimming beyond skill level, or in uncertain conditions. No running, or playing in slippery areas near bodies of water to minimize the risk of accidental injury, and falling into water. Constant uninterrupted adult supervision of children around all forms of water including open bodies of water, and buckets, etc. Never swimming alone, or in unsupervised places. Teach children to always swim with a friend. Lifeguards on duty at public swimming areas. Inflatable life jackets for children and adults with low swimming skills, when bathing, or swimming in open waters. Refraining from alcohol consumption before and while swimming. Ensuring that suction outlets in pools, hot tubs, and spas are safely constructed and maintained at a safe level. Ensuring the presence of isolation fences and locked doors around pools or reservoirs of water. Adequate rescue aids on boats and ships, training of crew in rescue procedures, and clear information given to passengers with practicing of emergency drills. Learning basic first aid, if possible, CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, techniques. This is particularly important for pool owners and individuals who regularly participate in water recreation. Effective surveillance. With effective surveillance, you can recognize behaviors or situations that might lead to life-threatening emergencies, such as drownings, or injuries to the head, neck, or spine, and then act quickly to modify the behavior, or control the situation. Effective surveillance has several elements. Recognition of dangerous behaviors. Victim recognition. Effective scanning. Zone of surveillance responsibility. Lifeguard stations. Recognition of dangerous behaviors. A focus of preventive lifeguarding is to intervene quickly to stop potentially dangerous behaviors that could result in an emergency. This may include redirecting a child to shallower water, stopping a group of teens from having breath-holding contests, or stopping swimmers from hyperventilating, breathing rapidly and deeply, and swimming underwater for extended periods. Swimmers, and non-swimmers, regardless of age, can become victims quickly because of dangerous behaviors, or other situations. A weak swimmer or non-swimmer who is. A child bobbing in water over his head. A small child crawling hand over hand toward deep water. A toddler left unattended. A weak swimmer or non-swimmer who is. A child wearing an improperly fitting life jacket. A victim experiencing a medical emergency. Participating in a high-risk, high-impact activity, such as diving. Victim recognition. Another element of effective surveillance is being able to recognize when someone is in trouble in the water. It is important to understand the behaviors that a victim shows when in distress or drowning. Someone in trouble may struggle at the surface for just a short time, or may quickly disappear beneath the surface without any signs of distress. Others may be submerged already when the process of drowning begins, such as the person who has jumped, or slipped into water over his or her head, and is struggling to reach the surface. A swimmer may be in distress, or actively struggling to survive. Others may be passive, and therefore unable to help themselves, showing little, or no movement. Understanding these behaviors enables lifeguards to recognize quickly when someone needs help. Lifeguards should be able to recognize and respond to a drowning victim within 30 seconds. Swimmers in distress. The distressed swimmer generally is able to reach for a rescue device, such as a rescue tube. If a safety line, or other floating object is nearby, a distressed swimmer may grab and cling to it for support. As conditions continue to affect the distressed swimmer, such as fatigue, cold, or sudden illness, he or she becomes less able to support him or herself in the water. As this occurs, his or her mouth moves closer to the surface of the water, and anxiety increases. If a distressed swimmer is not rescued, he or she may become a drowning victim. Therefore, you need to immediately initiate a rescue. Drowning victim, active. Drowning victims who are struggling to breathe may not always look the same. For some, the mouth sinks below the surface, and reappears, sometimes repeatedly. While the mouth is below the surface, the drowning victim attempts to keep the mouth closed to avoid swallowing water. When above the surface, the drowning victim quickly exhales, and then tries to inhale before the mouth goes below the surface again. While the victim is gasping for air, he or she also might take water into the mouth. For a young child who is in a horizontal face-down position, he or she is not able to keep the mouth above the surface of the water at all. Often, a drowning victim at, or near the surface is unable to call out for help. He or she can take in only enough air to breathe, so no air is left to call out. A drowning in progress often is silent. Drowning victim, passive. Anyone who is exhibiting one, or more of the following images for 30 seconds should be considered a drowning victim, and responded to immediately. It can be difficult to clearly see a victim who is underwater, or at the bottom of a pool because of glare, reflections, or water movement from the wind, or other swimmers. The victim may appear to look like a smudge, an object like a towel, or a shadow. Do not expect to see a clear outline of a person on the bottom. At waterfronts, submerged victims may not be visible, depending on the water depth.
Your absolute primary goal whenever you are lifeguarding is to help keep people safe. The main tool you use to do this is patron surveillance. Effective surveillance is the close and continuous observation of a person or group of people within your zone of coverage. Scan the entire volume of water, the bottom, middle, and surface, so as not to miss someone underwater. Any person under your careful watch can become a victim at any time. Even the most accomplished of athletes, including your fellow co-workers, can suffer medical emergencies while in the water. It doesn't matter if the person is a swimmer or non-swimmer, or an adult or child. Your continued focus and attention, and your ability to screen out distractions, is ultimately your most powerful tool for helping keep pool patrons safe. Much of your work as a lifeguard is preventive. In other words, you anticipate potentially dangerous behaviors and intervene before a serious or even fatal situation occurs. Be on the lookout for behaviors that put people at risk of injury, and intervene as appropriate to correct the situation. It could be a child bobbing up and down in an attempt to stay above water, or a child moving out of arm's reach of a parent or caretaker. Someone crawling hand over hand along the pool wall may indicate a weak or non-swimmer heading toward danger, as can someone grasping or clinging to something to stay afloat. At facilities or locations where life jackets are used, you need to keep an eye out for anyone with a poorly fitted life jacket or a jacket that's not fastened correctly. Notice if swimmers are taking deep, rapid breaths in an attempt to hold their breath underwater for an extended period. Also watch for swimmers who are playing underwater breath-holding games. Both of these dangerous activities should be stopped. Another element of effective surveillance is quickly recognizing when a person in the water is in trouble, whether he or she is a distressed swimmer, a drowning victim who is actively struggling to survive, or a drowning victim who is passive and unable to move. Understanding the behaviors of a person in trouble allows you to quickly recognize when someone needs help and respond appropriately. A swimmer can become distressed for several reasons, such as exhaustion, cramps, or sudden illness. Although people vary greatly in their ability to swim, swimmers in distress stand out from ordinary swimmers because in most cases, they are not able to make forward progress in the water despite their best attempts. Their motions can look agitated or uncoordinated as they work to tread water or stay afloat. They can often keep their head above water and may be able to wave or call out for help. But it is unlikely they'll make it to safety without your help. The situation for a distressed swimmer can turn from bad to worse at any moment. So it is important to remain vigilant and provide immediate assistance. Now let's take a look at a distressed swimmer from a lifeguard's position. This swimmer keeps her face out of the water, but can't seem to make it to safety on her own. Your quick recognition of these behaviors, followed by immediate rescue, can prevent this distressed swimmer from drowning. Now let's talk about victims who are drowning. These victims may be active or passive. A drowning victim who is active struggles to breathe. This victim may be at or near the water's surface. He tilts his head back in a desperate effort to breathe, while pressing and lifting with his arms at his front or sides. His body remains vertical, and his kick doesn't provide much support. If his face is visible, you may see a panicked or wide-eyed expression. This universal behavior is called the instinctive drowning response. The sole purpose of this victim's movements is to get his face and mouth above water so he can take a breath. What little air he takes in is consumed by the energy of his struggle, so he has no ability to call out for help. His face and mouth may go under the surface repeatedly as his ability to support himself diminishes. This surface struggle may last for only 20 to 60 seconds, if at all. Without intervention, he will submerge and the drowning process will accelerate, eventually resulting in loss of consciousness, followed by death, if aid is not provided. It is important to note, however, that these drowning victims may not always look the same. For example, one victim may thrash at the water's surface for a short time, while another may quickly and silently slip beneath the water and struggle to reach the surface. A young child who is drowning may behave similarly to other drowning victims. However, the heavier weight of the child's head may tip her forward into a face-down position, and she may doggy paddle or flap her arms at her side without moving forward. Let's take another look at the drowning victim who is active from the lifeguard's point of view. This person becomes a drowning victim as soon as she loses support in deep water. You must quickly recognize her signs of drowning and respond before she submerges and loses consciousness. Sometimes drowning victims do not struggle. These victims are considered passive. Drowning victims who are active can quickly progress to this stage. However, a person may suddenly become passive due to a medical condition such as a heart attack, or another cause such as a head injury, drug or alcohol use, or hyperventilation due to prolonged breath holding. A passive victim may float face down at or just below the surface of the water, or he may sink to the bottom. His body may be limp or have slight convulsive type movements. He has no defined arm or leg action, no locomotion, and no breathing. Let's take another look at this victim from the lifeguard's perspective. This swimmer is submerged face down at the bottom of the pool and not moving. From the lifeguard's point of view, it's sometimes difficult to distinguish a distressed swimmer or drowning victim from a patron who is simply playing around. It may also be difficult to identify a submerged drowning victim because of the water's depth, surface agitation, and glare. These can distort your view, making the victim at the bottom of a pool look more like a shadow, or a smudge, or stain on the pool floor. If you are unsure whether a person in the water needs help or is merely playing games, or if you see something on the bottom that should not be there, do not delay. Respond right away. Your fast response could save a life.
Another factor for effective surveillance is effective scanning. Knowing what to look for to determine if a victim is in trouble in the water is a first step, but you also need to know how to look. Scanning is a visual technique for watching patrons in the water. When scanning, you should not just passively watch patrons in the water. Effective scanning requires you to deliberately and actively observe swimmers' behaviors, and look for signals that someone in the water needs help. You must actively scan all patrons in the water, regardless of the type of activities taking place. Effective scanning. Drowning and injuries can happen in an instant, often silently. Scanning your entire area of responsibility quickly and thoroughly is important. You cannot prevent or save what you cannot see. Guidelines for effective scanning. Scan all patrons in your assigned area of responsibility. Stay focused, do not let your attention drift. Scan the entire volume of water, the bottom, middle, and surface. Move your head and eyes while scanning, and look directly at each area rather than staring in a fixed direction. You may notice movement with your peripheral, side, vision, but to recognize that a person is in trouble, you must look directly at him or her. Scan from point to point thoroughly and repeatedly. Do not neglect any part of the assigned area, including any deck or beach areas, and those areas under, around, and directly in front of the lifeguard station. Focus on effective patron surveillance instead of the scanning pattern itself. Scan for signs of potential problems. Arm and leg action, body position, and movement through the water may indicate that a patron is a weak swimmer and is in trouble in the water. Scan crowded and high-risk areas carefully. Partially hidden arm movements might indicate that a victim is actively drowning. Pay close attention to non-swimmers or weak swimmers. Excitement or lack of knowledge may lead non-swimmers or weak swimmers to become unknowingly careless. They might try things they would not otherwise do, or they might accidentally enter deep water. Maintain an active posture. Slouching, leaning back, sitting back with legs crossed, or resting your head in your hand may cause you to become too relaxed and lose focus. Adjust your body position, or stand up to eliminate blind spots. Be aware of areas that are difficult to see. Areas might be blocked when patrons cluster together, or water movement, such as from fountains or bubbles, may distort the view underwater. Change your body position regularly to help stay alert. For example, switch between seated and standing positions while in an elevated station. While scanning, do not be distracted by people or activities outside of your area of responsibility. Keep focused on the assigned zone. Do not interrupt scanning an area if a patron asks a question, or has a suggestion or concern. Acknowledge the patron, and quickly explain that you cannot look at him or her while talking, but you are listening to the patron. Politely but briefly answer the patron's question, suggestion, or concern, or refer him or her to the head lifeguard, facility manager, or another staff member.
Knowing what to look for to determine if a victim is in trouble in the water is a first step, but you also need to know how to look. To maintain the best focus and coverage during surveillance, use a visual technique known as scanning. Scanning effectively means moving your head, not just your eyes, to get a direct look at each part of your assigned zone. Focus on noticing each of the patrons in your zone as you scan from point to point repeatedly, including any deck or beach areas and any areas directly under, around, and in front of you. Scan the entire volume of water in your zone, including the bottom, the middle, and the surface. Scan crowded and high-risk areas carefully. Pay particular attention to any weak swimmers or non-swimmers. Maintain an active and ready posture to help you stay focused. Slouching or leaning back in a more relaxed position may inadvertently cause you to lose focus. Change your body position regularly to improve your view and help you stay alert. If you are in a chair or elevated stand, adjust your body position by standing up and sitting down while you continue to scan. Let's take a look at some of the more common scanning challenges you'll encounter. and strategies for overcoming them. You may get bored or fatigued. Exposure to sun and heat may also drain your energy. But there are things you can do to stay alert and focused. Be sure to change your body position and posture periodically, and rotate stations more frequently if possible. Keeping hydrated and cool by drinking plenty of water, staying in the shade, or getting wet during your break will also help keep your energy up. And of course, exercising, eating well, and getting plenty of rest while off duty are just as important. Glare from the sun or from indoor overhead lighting can reflect off of water or objects to create blind spots. Be prepared to handle glare by wearing glasses with polarized lenses. At different times of the day, you may need to change body positions to successfully look around and see through glare spots. If you feel your vision is still obstructed by the glare, even when using these strategies, lifeguard stations may need to change locations. Ask your supervisor about repositioning your station if you can't see any part of your zone. As water refracts light, your sight can be tricked by visual distortions. Be aware of what the bottom of the pool really looks like when empty of swimmers. Get to know its normal features, such as stains, drains, colored tiles, and depth markings. Always scan the bottom carefully. When you notice distortion, try adjusting your body's position while you scan. Then look more closely to verify what you are seeing. If something doesn't look right, assume it's a body underwater and react immediately. You may encounter areas that are difficult to see due to a facility's particular layout or features. Floatable features, play structures, or other equipment being used by patrons can obstruct your view. At times, patrons may crowd together and block certain areas. Your best strategy in this case is to adjust your position or stand up to check underneath, around, and into the blind spots from various points of view. Another very common challenge to effective surveillance is distraction. The noise from activities, patrons, music, or water movement can compete for your attention. Co-workers or patrons may want to converse with you. If someone asks you a question, acknowledge him while you continue to scan your zone. Then, politely let him know that you are listening, but you have to keep scanning the water so you can't look at him directly. Patron activities in your zone or other zones of surveillance can also create visual distractions. When distractions arise, remind yourself to stay focused on scanning the swimmers in your zone. When your facility is crowded, you must handle the additional scanning requirements as well as the increased distractions. If your zone becomes too crowded, signal for extra coverage. In general, use good communication to keep the patron activities in your zone orderly and safe. And remember to keep your attention on your zone and remain vigilant. If at any point you believe you need assistance to effectively cover your zone, don't hesitate to get a supervisor's attention.
Another effective surveillance. Zone of surveillance responsibility. Lifeguards' zone of surveillance responsibility referred to as zones. These are the specific areas of the water, deck, pier, or shoreline that are your responsibility to scan from your lifeguard station. To ensure that all areas of the pool are covered adequately, lifeguard might be assigned at zone coverage, total coverage, emergency backup coverage. In zone coverage, the swimming area is divided into separate zones, with one zone for each lifeguard station. Zones can be designated by markers, such as ladders, lane lines, lifelines, buoys, or the shape of the pool. Zone coverage is effective for high-risk areas, or activities, avoiding blind spots, and reducing the number of patrons watched by each lifeguard. When zone coverage is being provided, each lifeguard needs to know the zone for each guarding position. At a minimum, Zones should overlap by several feet so that the boundaries between them have double coverage. This prevents any area from not being scanned. When zones overlap, it is important that each lifeguard react to an emergency, that is, you should not assume that the other lifeguard will notice a problem, and react. However, if the position of the other lifeguard allows a significantly quicker rescue, your Emergency Action Plan, EAP, should establish how lifeguards communicate as to who enters the water, and who provides backup coverage. When you are assigned total coverage, you will be the only lifeguard conducting patron surveillance while you are on duty. Some facilities, such as a small pool, always assign their lifeguards total coverage. Other facilities use total coverage for specific situations, such as when there are a limited number of patrons present. When only one lifeguard is conducting patron surveillance, that lifeguard has to scan the entire area, control the activities of patrons in and out of the water, and recognize and respond to emergencies. If adequate coverage cannot be provided for all patrons, inform a supervisor that help is needed. In emergency situations when 2 or more lifeguards are on duty, and one lifeguard must enter the water for a rescue, lifeguards who remain out of the water must now supervise a larger area. They might need to move to better vantage points, or close part of the swimming area, depending on the facility's design. Figure A illustrates zone coverage when 3 lifeguards are on surveillance duty. Figure B shows an example of emergency backup coverage for the same 3-zone facility. Figure B depicts lifeguard Y as the primary rescuer. He or she signals and enters the water, indicated by a dotted line. The other 2 lifeguards, lifeguards X and Z, stand in each of the lifeguard chairs, and divide the responsibility for scanning the pool. Meanwhile, additional lifeguards or safety team members monitor the rescue, and prepare to assist with additional equipment, and call emergency medical services, EMS, personnel, if appropriate. Last effective surveillance. Lifeguard stations. Lifeguards perform patron surveillance from a variety of positions including elevated, ground level, roving, and floating stations. Additional coverage at waterfront areas sometimes is provided by foot patrols, boat patrols, and 4-wheel drive vehicles. The goal is to provide optimum coverage for the whole facility by placing lifeguards in positions to quickly recognize and respond to emergencies. To ensure that lifeguards stay alert, periodic rotations and breaks from surveillance are built into their surveillance schedules. The location of any lifeguard station must allow you to see your entire zone. The lifeguard stand may need to be moved, or the position adjusted during the day to adapt to the changing sun, glare, wind, or water conditions. It is critical for you to have a clear view of your entire zone. Elevated lifeguard stations generally provide the most effective position for a broad view of the zone and patron activities. This is especially important at a facility where a single lifeguard at a time performs patron surveillance. When you are scanning from an elevated station, be sure to include the area under, around, and directly in front of the stand. Movable stands should be positioned close to the edge of the water, with enough room to climb up and down from the stand. The area surrounding an elevated stand must be kept clear of patrons, or objects that might interfere with your ability to respond. You must know how to safely exit the stand, both in the course of a normal rotation as well as in an emergency. Be sure to practice with the rescue tube so that you are able to do so quickly, and without getting injured. A safety zone should be established that allows access to the water in case of an emergency. At a waterfront, the safety zone should be thoroughly inspected with rakes and shovels before opening each day. This helps to prevent injuries to lifeguards during emergency exits from the lifeguard stand. Lifeguards sometimes are assigned to a fixed location on a deck, or in shallow water. These stations allow for quick response, and are common around winding rivers, in shallow water areas with play structures, and at the end of slides. The primary purpose of ground-level stations is to be close to patrons so you can easily make assists, and enforce safety rules for patrons in the water, and on the deck. While maintaining surveillance, you also can educate patrons about the reasons behind the rules. However, you should never become distracted from surveillance duties by talking socially with patrons, or other staff. When a facility becomes unusually crowded, such as during a special event, or activity, supervisors might assign a lifeguard to a roving station. The roving lifeguard is assigned a specific zone, which also is covered by another lifeguard in an elevated station. These roving, or walking, lifeguards are mobile, and able to position themselves where needed within the zone. Combining the views from elevated stations, with the mobility of the roving lifeguard, provides extra coverage to help ensure effective patron surveillance. In many waterfront facilities, lifeguards are stationed to watch swimmers from a watercraft, usually as extra coverage. Rescue watercraft typically are used to patrol the outer edge of a swimming area. Often, someone in trouble in the water can be reached more quickly from watercraft than from a lifeguard station on the shore. Make sure that you are well trained in operating the facility's watercraft, before using it for surveillance, or to make a rescue. Use caution with motorized watercraft to avoid injuring swimmers, or damaging lifelines when crossing into the swimming area to make a rescue.
Swimming facilities are typically divided into zones of surveillance. The supervisor, or facility manager, designates these zones to provide the best visual coverage of patrons. Your zone can change based on the number of people in the zone, the type or variety of activities going on, and environmental conditions affecting visibility. The phrase zone coverage means that the swimming area is divided into separate zones, with at least one lifeguard assigned to each zone. When providing zone coverage, you need to be aware of the zone boundaries for each guard's position. These zones will usually overlap to provide double coverage at the boundary areas. If an emergency occurs in an overlapping area, both you and the lifeguard of the adjoining zone are responsible. Whoever first notices the emergency should activate the EAP. When assigned total coverage, you will be the only lifeguard conducting patron surveillance while on duty. Smaller facilities may always assign total coverage. At larger facilities, total coverage may be used for specific situations, such as when the number of patrons is low. At any time while you're providing coverage, if you feel you can't be effective alone, let a supervisor know you need help. Adequate backup coverage should always be available. If a lifeguard must enter the water for a rescue in a multiple lifeguard facility, the remaining lifeguards must now supervise a larger area. They might need to move or stand up at their stations to improve their view. Meanwhile, the other lifeguards monitor the rescue and provide support as required by their emergency action plan. Lifeguards are responsible for performing effective surveillance from a variety of positions, including ground-level stations, elevated stations, floating stations, and roving stations. If you work from a ground-level station, you'll likely be assigned to a certain location on deck or in shallow water. These kinds of stations are often found in shallow water play areas, at the ends of slides, and around winding rivers. Ground-level stations are closer to patrons, which can make communicating with patrons easier. When at a ground-level station, make sure to keep your focus on surveillance and do not become distracted. Working from an elevated station will usually give you a broad view of your zone and will help minimize the effects of glare. An elevated station can also be a benefit when you're responsible for providing total coverage. When using this type of station, make sure you know how to safely exit the stand when responding to an emergency or doing a rotation. Be aware that elevated stations can create surveillance blind spots near and directly under the stand. Don't overlook these areas. Be certain to scan under, directly around, and in front of the stand as part of your routine surveillance strategy. A lifeguard in a roving station provides walking surveillance coverage at ground level, while a guard in an elevated station provides coverage for the same zone at the same time. This extra coverage assures thorough surveillance when facilities are particularly crowded. Because roving guards are mobile, they're able to scan while positioning themselves within the zone where the need is greatest. Roving stations are also helpful when providing total coverage, as walking not only keeps the lifeguard more alert, but also helps provide multiple vantage points from which to scan the water. Floating stations are usually used as extra coverage to patrol the outer edge of a waterfront swimming area. Floating stations include rescue boards, kayaks, and other watercraft. Facilities with floating stations should provide the necessary training for their use. During a typical workday, you will likely complete several rotations. Rotations are when lifeguards rotate from one station to another. Rotations help you stay alert and fight fatigue and monotony. No matter what kind of station you're working in, your rotation into or out of the station must be done with uninterrupted surveillance of that zone. At ground level stations, this is done by beginning your scan of the zone as you walk to the station. When you arrive, stand to the side of the outbound lifeguard. Continue your scan of the zone while you exchange any details that could be important to your effective coverage of that zone. Following this information exchange, tell the other lifeguard that you have the zone covered, and she is free to rotate out. The outbound lifeguard then continues her scan of the zone as she is walking away from the station. The procedure for rotating into and out of elevated stations is similar to that of ground level stations. But it is also slightly different because of the need to climb up to and down from the station. Begin scanning as you walk toward the station. When you arrive, stand to the side of the station while you continue scanning the zone. After a few moments of scanning, tell the other lifeguard that you have the zone covered and that he can climb down. Once the outbound lifeguard is on deck, he positions himself on the other side of the station and resumes his scan of the zone. Verbally confirm that he is actively scanning, then climb up into the station, make any necessary adjustments, and resume your scanning of the zone. Exchange any details that could be important to your effective coverage of that zone. Following this information exchange, tell the other lifeguard that you have the zone covered and he is free to rotate out. The outbound lifeguard will continue his scan of the zone as he rotates to the next station. The rules at your facility are designed to keep people safe from risks that could injure them. But sometimes patrons aren't aware of the rules, because in their enthusiasm to be at the facility, they may overlook posted signs that warn them of particular risks. So, if you believe that a patron may not be aware of certain rules or risks, use the opportunity to prevent injury by verbally communicating both the rules and the risks to the patron in a friendly, positive tone. You'll often find that patrons are happy to follow the rules and protect themselves when they understand why an action is dangerous, instead of simply being told not to do it. But sometimes enforcing rules requires a slightly more direct, but always respectful, method of communication.
Clear the pool!
Consider how you would handle this situation.
Yeah, what's up?
Excuse me, sir. We're closing the pool because we heard thunder. I'm going to need you to step out of the pool and leave the pool area for your own safety.
Okay, I've just got a couple more laps I gotta do. I'm almost done.
I really need you to get out of the pool, sir.
Just a couple more laps.
Igor, what's the problem?
I told the gentleman that he needs to exit the pool because I heard thunderstorm and we're closing the pool, and he didn't listen and continued to swim his laps.
Did you explain to him about the consequences of having his membership suspended if he doesn't leave?
No, I did not.
Okay, why don't you try that and I'll be right here if you need me.
All right.
Yeah, what's up?
Sir, if you don't leave the pool area, there are possible consequences of you losing your membership.
Okay.
Thank you.
What did the lifeguard do to protect patrons when thunder was heard? To protect patrons when thunder was first heard, the lifeguard signaled for patrons to clear the pool. Once the lifeguard zone was cleared, he moved to the water's edge to get the patron's attention rather than continuing to blow his whistle. What strategies did the lifeguard use to try to get the patron to understand the importance of clearing the pool? To try to get the patron to comply with the rules, the lifeguard first caught his attention and politely spoke with the man. He then explained that thunder had been heard in the area and asked him to please move to shelter for his own safety. After the patron ignored his request, he signaled for the manager to assist. Then, the lifeguard firmly, but still politely, explained to the patron that if he did not comply, he could lose his membership.
Guarding zones with play structure. Facilities may have play structures that are either permanent or removable. Permanent structures include sprays and fountains, interactive water play structures, and dumping buckets. Removable structures include large floating toys, inflatable play structures, and water basketball and volleyball nets. Some play structures require their own lifeguards, whereas others are watched by lifeguards surveying a larger area. While guarding at play structures, do not let a play structure become overcrowded. Be prepared to restrict the number of patrons using it at one time. Do not allow patrons to swim underneath structures. Watch that patrons return to the surface after dropping into the water from a floating feature. Swimmers can be surprised by the fall, or become disoriented, especially if they do not realize they will be dropping into deep water. Pay close attention to children playing in and around sprays, fountains, and interactive water play structures. These attractions usually are in shallow water. Excited children may run and fall. A very young child who falls might not be able to get back up, or may strike his or her head. Pay close attention to patrons in moving water. Moving water can surprise people. They might lose their balance and be unable to stand up again. Watch for overcrowding and horseplay on floating structures. These structures are tethered to the bottom of the pool. Some allow patrons to walk from one floating structure to another, while holding onto an overhead rope. Keep play safe and orderly. Patrons may climb onto floating toys and jump back into the water. They may not notice what is around them and jump onto other swimmers or into water that is over their heads. Patrons may throw balls and other toys and hit unsuspecting swimmers, resulting in injury. Guarding special rides and attractions. Special attractions create a lot of excitement and can include rides such as bowl slides, multi-person raft rides, uphill water coasters, and high-speed water slides. Some attractions found at deep water pools also include diving platforms, cable swings, and hand-over-hand structures like ropes, nets, and rings. In a water park setting, there are multiple attractions designed for a variety of age groups and abilities. Regardless of the patron's swimming ability, patrons may become fearful, disoriented, or off balance, thus requiring assistance. Follow these general principles when guarding attractions. Watch patrons as they enter and exit an attraction. Dispatch patrons safely on a ride at set intervals. Dispatching is the method of informing patrons when it is safe for them to proceed on a ride. Carefully watch both the water below and the activities overhead. Keep patrons in view as long as possible. Keeping patrons in view can be a problem on some attractions. Structures, such as caves, enclosed tubes, bridges, and buildings, might prevent you from seeing patrons at all times. When a patron goes out of sight, watch to make sure that he or she emerges safely on the other side. Ensure that patrons who submerge return to the surface. The excitement may cause weak swimmers, or non-swimmers to overestimate their abilities, or underestimate the water's depth. Be aware of special risks. Structures designed to have patrons sit, or climb on them, or swim over, or under them, pose hazards. Supervise patrons carefully. Someone who falls off of a mat, raft, or tube might be injured, or pose a hazard to another patron. Guarding at water slides. On some water slides, patrons ride on an inner tube, raft, mat, or sled. On others, riding equipment is not allowed. On some slides, only one person is allowed on an inner tube, or a raft. On others, 2 or more people can go together on a special tube, or raft. On an inner tube, or raft, patrons ride in a sitting position. If no equipment is used, the proper riding position typically is face up, and feet first. Lifeguard stations may be positioned at the top, middle, and/or bottom of a slide. Follow these guidelines when lifeguarding at a water slide. When dispatching at the top of a slide, check that patrons are tall enough to use the slide by using a measuring pole, or line on a wall. Instruct riders how to ride down the slide according to manufacturer's instructions, and facility protocols, and make sure they are in the correct riding position. Instruct riders not to stop on the slide. Help riders with the equipment. Confirm that the riders are ready to go, and signal them to start. If assisting riders to take off, use tube handles when available. Avoid pushing, or pulling riders by their shoulders, arms, or legs. Dispatch the next rider at the proper intervals. For drop-off slides, speed slides, and free-fall slides, ensure that the previous rider has left the run-out end of the slide, or the catch pool, and the lifeguard at the bottom has signaled for the next rider. If you can see the lifeguard at the bottom, he or she can use a hand signal, or whistle. If you cannot see the lifeguard at the bottom, a mechanical system, such as light signals, can be used. When stationed at the middle of a slide, watch for riders who stop, slow down, stand up, or form a chain, lose their mat, tube, or raft, or have trouble getting down the slide, hit their heads on the side of the slide. Alert the dispatcher and lifeguard at the end of the slide of the situation, and assist patrons as necessary. When stationed at the bottom of a slide, observe all riders exiting the slide into the catch pool. Patrons might not realize the depth of the catch pool, and may need assistance. Assist riders who appear to be off balance, or get caught underwater in the strong downward flow of water in the catch pool. This strong force can knock a person off balance, or hold a small person, or non-swimmer underwater. Help riders, if needed, from the run-out, or catch pool. Some patrons might be disoriented, or frightened from the ride. Ensure that riders do not cross in front of any slide when getting out of the run-out, or catch pool. Signal the lifeguard at the top when each rider has moved out of the catch pool, or run out and it is clear to send the next rider. General procedure for a water emergency. In all situations involving a water rescue, follow these general procedures. Activate the Emergency Action Plan, EAP. Enter the water, if necessary. In some cases, you will be able to use a reaching assist to pull a victim to safety from a deck, or pier, such as a distressed swimmer at the surface. However, in most situations you will need to enter the water to perform a successful rescue. You must quickly evaluate, and consider many factors when choosing how to safely enter the water. Each time you rotate to a new station, keep in mind the following factors as you consider how to enter the water to perform a rescue: water depth, location and condition of the victim, location of other swimmers, design of the lifeguard station, your location, facility setup, and type of equipment used, rescue board, rescue buoy, or rescue tube. Perform an appropriate rescue. Begin your rescue by approaching the victim. Always keep the victim, or the location where you last spotted the victim, within your line of sight. You may approach the victim by walking with the rescue tube to the victim in shallow water, swimming with the rescue tube to the victim, traveling on the deck or beach for a distance, then swimming with the rescue tube to the victim, paddling on a rescue board, navigating in a watercraft. Be aware that the victim's condition and location can change between the time you notice the problem and when you complete your approach. Move the victim to a safe exit point. After performing a water rescue, move the victim to a safe exit point. For some, this can be as simple as helping him or her to walk out of the water, such as in a simple assist. For others, it requires supporting the victim on the rescue tube while keeping his or her mouth and nose out of the water as you move to the safe exit point, such as in an active victim rear rescue. Do not automatically return to the point where you entered. You may be able to reach another point faster. However, realize that the closest place on land may not be feasible for removing the victim. There may be limited deck space, or lane ropes, or equipment, or other features may block the way. Move quickly to the nearest point with appropriate access. Be sure that the chosen exit site has enough room to safely remove the victim from the water. You also will need enough space to provide any additional care needed, such as giving ventilations, or CPR. Remove the victim from the water. Safely remove the victim from the water. For conscious victims, this may involve simply assisting the victim out of the water. For victims who are unresponsive, or victims suspected of having a head, neck, or spinal injury, you will need to use a backboard, or a rescue board. Provide emergency care as needed. The victim may need additional emergency care after the water rescue. This can range from helping the person regain composure to giving ventilations, or performing CPR. Report, advise, and release. After an emergency, you and other members of the safety team must complete incident report forms, advise the victim on the next steps, and release the victim to the appropriate parties. Every water rescue should have a written report. Documentation is important for legal reasons as well as for tracking when, where, and how often incidents occur. After the victim is out of the water, and care has been given, advise the person, as appropriate, by providing any safety instructions necessary to prevent the likelihood of the incident recurring. You then may release the victim to his or her own care, or to a parent, or guardian. Reaching out to our teams. One day, a little mouse living on a farm spied the farmer and his wife opening a package. He was aghast to discover that the package contained not food, but a mousetrap. The mouse ran to farmyard warning everyone.
There is a mouse trap in the house. There is a mouse trap in the house.
The chicken raised his head and exclaimed, "Mr. Mouse, I can tell you this trap is a grave concern to you. But it has no consequence to me and I cannot be bothered with it." The mouse turned to the pig.
I am so sorry, Mr. Mouse, but the trap is no concern of mine either.
The mouse then turned to the bull. Sounds like you have a problem, Mr. Mouse, but not one that concerns me. The mouse returned to the house. dejected that no one would help him, or was concerned about his dilemma. He knew he had to face the trap on his own. That night, the sound of a trap, catching its prey was heard, throughout the house. The farmer's wife rushed, to see what was caught. In the darkness, she could not see that, it was a venomous snake, whose tail the trap had caught. The snake bit the farmer's wife. The wife caught a bad fever, and the farmer knew the best way to treat a fever was with chicken soup. He took his hatchet to the farmyard to get the soup's main ingredient. The wife got sicker, and friends visited her round the clock. The farmer had to feed them, so he butchered the pig. The farmer's wife got worse, and died. So many friends and family came to her funeral that the farmer had to slaughter the bull to feed them all. So the next time we hear that one of our teammates is facing a problem and think it does not concern or affect us, let us remember this. When any one of our team members is in trouble, we are all at risk.